In this video, I'll be giving an overview to what RootMotion is, for those of you that are wanting to try out games with more animated characters. Along with this, at the very end, I will go through how I have animated for RootMotion in Blender, as this is something I found very little information for elsewhere online. RootMotion refers to characters in games whose movement is driven by their animation rather than code. For most video game characters, their movement is script-driven. There's a code telling them to go forward and rotate so much each frame, with the animation being mostly a visual aspect applied on top of that scripted movement. The most basic characters have an animation for standing still, and one that is applied when moving forward or turning, a walking animation. RootMotion, however, is animation that has its base or root motion baked in at the animating stage that can be applied to the character in-engine as actual movement and rotation. To illustrate, rather than animating a walking loop on the spot, as shown here in Blender, RootMotion animations are animated moving the armature as part of the animation. The result is very controlled animation that plays out the same in-game engine as it does in your animating software. For example, say you want to have a sneaky character that's doing very exaggerated tiptoeing movements through a scene. Using RootMotion, you can animate the stop and starts of each step. Look at the example in the video. The example using RootMotion has speeds that stop, start, slow down, speed up, rather than going at a consistent speed all the time. Going on from here, you can have more extreme examples with your animations. Characters with exaggerated side-to-side movements, characters that might have running pivots and V shapes. Using RootMotions, you can have very specific patterns of movements that would be hard to pull off with code. Having this much control and consistency between animation in your animating program and engine allows you to animate very specific actions, such as the pivoting motions seen here. By blending between two animations, one of 90-degree movements and one of 180-degree movements, our character can be animated pivoting on the spot to any angles, with slight movements, rather than just rotating to the spot with code. Finally, for this section, RootMotion's consistency allows you to make more grounded animations that avoid foot sliding. The example above shows a script-driven turning that just has the basic walking animation on it, and at the right, a RootMotion example that's blending between an animation of the character walking forward and one where they're walking and turning slightly to the side. While subtle, the result with RootMotion is consistently having the feet stay in the right place without risk of feet sliding. Hopefully I've gone across what RootMotion is. Now I'll talk a bit about when you should consider using it and not consider using it. There are different levels you can use RootMotion. All these take time to animate, more than a script-driven player, and will require your team or self to have a good handle between programming, Unity's mechanism system, and animation itself. Especially, you must have a programmer and animator that will be willing to communicate and work a lot between each other to get your player moving in a way your designer and game needs. RootMotion requires all these fields to work together before you can even begin moving the character. So, is it worth it? While the polish of RootMotion can be tempting, it is worth considering if you really need it. In all the examples I've shown above, there are equivalent ways to get visually pleasing results without using the complexity of RootMotion solutions. I would only really recommend RootMotion if your game has a heavy focus towards very exaggerated movement animations, or you want very realistic animations and have some very complex movements such as pivoting characters. Even then, it may not still be necessary to do RootMotion, or if you have a wide range of characters to animate, it may still be too much to do. RootMotion is a nice touch, but it is not usually essential. Finally, before I end this video, I'm going to go over the rig I've used in the examples I've shown in the video. Here's my robot character. For the most part, it's a normal rig, except for the feet IK, that I've set to work at a global axis rather than following the parent armature. As you can see when I try to move the character in the video above, the feet stay as they are. I do this because when I animate for RootMotion, I do so because I want the feet usually to stay in the same place. It gives my animations an extra feel of weight and consistency. After trying a few different setups, having the feet locked to a global axis has been the best solution I've found for consistently animating this way. The only thing I need to keep in mind when animating like this is that the feet end in a position comparable to the parent object that works for looping, such as with turning animations, and for that I just make sure the feet line up at the end of an animation as they did at the beginning, usually using a reference object. To achieve this effect in Blender, I simply added a constraint to both feet IK bones that makes them treat an empty game object I have outside of the armature as the parent object that I keep in a fixed location. When I export this to Unity, it all carries over and works fine. So now I'll be wrapping up this video. I'll just give a few final tips or instructions I think are useful for working with RootMotion in teams. For the animator, I recommend starting off just animating the positions and rotation movements for your character so your programmer can have something to work with immediately before you animate footsteps and more complex motions. That way they can give you feedback and you can do broad changes before you have to rearrange feet and whatnot. Remember to use Unity's mechanism system to get more of your animations. If you want to have one animation, you can just get your walking animation, add another slot to your blend tree, and speed it up a bit so you can have a running animation with consistent footwork as well. And that's about it. If you want to see a video tutorial series on more complex RootMotion characters and how to actually script and apply them into Unity, I recommend the tutorial series linked on the screen now. That's all, good luck, and I hope you own your progress in game development.